Hello guys, welcome to Movies Foster. If you are new, please subscribe and support us. This 7 minutes will entertain you. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 2022 crime, horror, thriller on Netflix, is a direct sequel to 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. While filmmaker David Blue Garcia meant for the sequel to be respectful to Hooper's original, the end product is a sequence of foolish moves that eventually butcher the legacy of a decades-spanning horror franchise. After nearly 50 years of hiding, Leatherface returns to terrorize a group of idealistic young friends who accidentally disrupt his carefully shielded world in a remote Texas town. Here's an in-depth look at the film, what the film's finale was meant to suggest, and the ideas that it managed to evolve during its run length. Needless to say, there are a lot of spoilers. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 2022. Texas Chainsaw Massacre begins with a voiceover by John Larroquette, who also voiced Hooper's 1974 film, recounting the heinous murders that took place on August 18, 1973, in Texas. And how lone survivor Sally Hardesty, Olwen Fowler, has refused to comment further on the terrors she experienced on that dreadful day. This scene takes place outside a petrol station, where Lila, Elsie Fisher, is picking up a few things before traveling to Harlow with her sister Melody, Sarah Yarkin, and pals Dante, Jacob Lottymore, and Ruth, Nell Hudson. The youths have arrived in Harlow with the idea of rebuilding the empty town into a flourishing community, which is admirable but foolish given their lack of knowledge of the horrors that still haunt the region. When they get in Harlow, they find a Confederate flag draped from a structure, which is terrible for more reasons than one, but more so for the group as investors would be arriving soon. After Dante and Melody enter the supposedly abandoned Harlow orphanage to remove the flag, they are met by an elderly woman called Virginia, who claims to still be the owner of the establishment. When pressed for proof, she refuses, telling Dante, a black guy, that the Confederate flag meant nothing to her because she had raised many boys like him. She severely gets sick once the cops arrive, leading the officers and Ruth to accompany her in an ambulance. A towering, frightening guy also joins them. He had been staying at the orphanage with Ms. Virginia, probably as the last of her boys that she looked after. All hell breaks loose when Virginia dies unexpectedly. The guy is none other than Bubba Sawyer, aka Leatherface, and the loss of his lone caretaker wakes the murderer within him after 50 years. The horrible atrocities commence, with Ruth and the police officers being slaughtered in the cornfields. Leatherface swings his chainsaw wildly in a fit of wrath near the end of Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when Sally Hardesty had the last laugh, being able to walk away from him right at the end. What occurred next is unknown, but based on the half-baked indications in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, something horrible happened to the Sawyer family, following which Leatherface was committed to Harlow Orphanage. Being a cannibalistic murderer who participated in his family's ritual of torturing outsiders, Leatherface, of course, is not of sound mind, and the original picture implied that his mental abilities were slightly stunted, similar to those of a kid. It is probable that the reason the killings have ceased after 1975 is that Virginia was able to prevent him from succumbing to this fundamental and primitive drive by nourishing him with love and shielding him from the outer world. Although the adolescent's presence in Harlow upsets Leatherface's existence, which is compounded by Virginia's murder, the teenagers have no responsibility for what follows thereafter. No matter how sympathetic Leatherface's past is, in which his character is significantly impacted by nurture or lack thereof, it is crucial to remember that he is a remorseless serial murderer with no empathy for anybody and no qualms about butchering innocence when he feels like it. The underlying themes of a film, particularly horror, help determine the fabric of a story, since the unfolding of the same is dependent on how well these subjects are executed. Unfortunately, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is unsure of what it stands for, while there is an underlying criticism of gentrification, which is a serious issue that leads to the displacement of local communities. Labeling the youngsters as gentrif is a little unfair, as Dante and Melody genuinely believed in the idea of transforming Harlow into a thriving community. Because Harlow was already a ghost town, and most of the properties had been abandoned, they were not displacing anybody, at least not unintentionally, given their belief that the bank had resolved the matter. While their presence in Harlow can be interpreted as privileged kids disrupting peaceful semi-urban life, this does not appear to be the case, as they appear to be mostly respectful of the place's history, despite being woefully unprepared to deal with the monstrosities that haunt Harlow in the form of Leatherface. Aside from that, the film's attitude on gun regulation is unclear. Are they sympathetic to Lila's pain, or are they promoting the use of weapons? When necessary, this problem manifests itself in the shape of Lila's character, who, while meatier than the others, lacks intellectual subtlety. Lila, a survivor of a major school shooting, is visibly affected by the experience, which makes her anti-gun attitude rather plain and comprehensible. However, when her character is portrayed to be captivated by weapons in the same way, it contradicts her survivor's guilt and her character in general. When measured against substantial meta-narrative, these concepts fall flat, much like Halloween Kills' superficial, out-of-place anti-mob rhetoric, which ended up harming rather than aiding the story. Ending: why is it a disservice to franchise fans? Sally Hardesty is entrenched as the penultimate girl in horror history. A disguised cannibal shows his rage in a distinctively horrifying fashion on screen, and the finale gives catharsis to spectators, who sigh in relief due to Sally's escape. While the ultimate purpose of horror is to avoid cliches and to confound expectations, there are multiple reasons why the finale of Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre fails to achieve these requirements. The obvious flaw in the legacy sequel is not just Leatherface, who appears to be more of a machine murdering people, it simply feels so inauthentic, but also the characterization of Sally Hardesty, who jeopardizes the safety of two young children in order to get revenge. As someone who witnessed the atrocities of Leatherface firsthand and lost friends and relatives all those years ago, it is just dishonorable to represent Hardesty as someone who would do this to other survivors her age and traumatized by the incident. Furthermore, with Leatherface slaughtering Hardesty in such a casual manner, he literally plunges his chainsaw right through her and tosses her in a pile of garbage. Sally's success as the penultimate girl in the original is undone, if not outright disrespected, in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In an era when horror is undergoing a final girl renaissance, Sidney Prescott Laurie Strode, it is regressive not only to murder off one of horror's most iconic final girls in such an unceremonious manner, but also unjust to decapitate one of the final girls, Melody, in a surprising final twist. While there is nothing inherently wrong with killing Melody, the way it has been done creates an inversion of the final scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and not in a good way. Lila, traumatized beyond repair, helplessly watches a cannibalistic killer behead her sister and dance maniacally on the streets while she escapes in a self-driving car. While pain is a strong incentive in slashers, this specific cycle is too forced, on the nose, and sloppily performed to work within the parameters of the genre. This is Movie Foster. I hope you like this. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and support us.